Hello and welcome back to Beyond the Bar podcast. I'm your host Anisa Tova, and I'm always smiling, but I'm smiling extra today because I have someone really awesome. His name is John Fellin. Professionally, John is a family law attorney and a founder of his own law firm, Fellin Law Firm, that's located on Long Island, New York. But outside of his title, he is a very interesting man. He's a devout family man. He's definitely a guy you want in your corner. I mean, the guy's larger than life, literally. And he's witty, he's funny, he's super eloquent, and he has a great story. So I cannot wait to dive in. John, welcome to the show.
Hi, Denise. How are you? It's great to be here.
Fantastic. So, I've known you for a while, but you did share with me that you grew up in a restaurant family, practically washing dishes, waiting tables before and even during the law school. So, tell me more about that. And how do you feel that hospitality background influenced your approach to how you practice law today?
It's so true that I kind of grew up in the business from the time I was 4 years old. My father had catering halls, and I'd be running around the place, and I'd be pretending that I was working there. And then eventually, when junior high sort of hit, I actually did work there. And some people spent their junior high and their high school Fridays and Saturdays hanging out with their friends, and I spent an awful lot of them washing dishes, waiting tables, and making drinks. And I think the hospitality background is a side of law that sometimes gets forgotten about a little bit. That at its heart, it really is a service business. At its heart, you're dealing with immediate problems. You're dealing with people who are coming to you because they need a very particular thing. And in the hospitality business, it's a meal, and with us, it's legal services. But the same principles apply: the responsiveness, the kindness, the effect of a smile, and as Danny Meyer, the restaurateur, would have you believe, making people feel like they're leaving with a warm hug after the experience. And it's harder to do in a divorce case because people aren't always happy to be going through a divorce as they are to be going to a great restaurant. But you can still leave with the principles and that idea that they feel taken care of.
That is beautifully said. I've never thought about it in those terms. It must have been a terrific school of life and really dealing with different personalities. There's a saying, customer is always right. Well, let's talk about that. So, if you have a client who rightfully so have very emotional, because there's that fear of unknown as they're about to embark on a divorce journey, how do you deal with that piece? Someone who really is just so wrapped up in their emotions and may even appear to be, unreasonable.
I think that the skill of working with that type of client, or a great client who's having that moment in their divorce case, I think that defines what separates lawyers from great lawyers. And it's kind of a skill that my first mentor had me work on, and that I work on every day. And every day is an ego check in this business, so it doesn't really always work. But you know, clients want to be heard. I think more than anything, clients want to be heard, and often they're coming out of a marriage where they didn't feel all that heard, and they want somebody to hear them. And so, I think the mistake a lot of young lawyers make, or inexperienced lawyers make, is they try to convince all their clients that they're right all the time, that they're the lawyer, that they have this knowledge, that they know the ins and the outs of the system, and for that reason, they should just be listened to. Um, but I think where we go back to that adage of the customer is always right, I think what we really mean by that in the restaurant business and then transferring into the law business is you have to make the client feel like they were respected, like their feelings were right. And so sometimes the best way to deal with that is to really work with a client in a language and a personality that they can understand, and use compassion and use resourcefulness and use creativity to help them understand why in certain positions they may want to have a change of perspective.
That is an interesting take on that. Client being always right does not necessarily mean that they are maybe correct in their assumptions and thinking, but being heard, validated, and, that's not an easy thing to do with someone who is, going through lots of emotions and just sort of leaning into it and listening. That really is a great perspective. You've also shared with me that you have sort of this dislike for chaos, that you almost have, I don't know if it's a need, but you like predictability, right? How do you feel that trait sort of manifests in how you practice? Because for me it's efficiency, and that's one of the things that I'm allergic to, is a lack of efficiency. So I'm a doer, but I think that's different, right, than what you're talking about, especially when you're dealing with, with the emotionally charged cases.
Yeah, anybody anybody around me will tell you that my thought process and sometimes my immediate organization is not all that efficient because my mind goes a mile a minute. But thankfully, I've surrounded myself with people that have skills where maybe my personality falls short a little bit. But my advice, I think, the one thing I always tell clients is I'm not here to get you what you want tomorrow. I'm here to make it so that when you and I speak to each other 5 years from now, your life is exponentially better than it is right now. And I think the reason I hate chaos so much is because chaos requires recovery. And if you start working on the recovery immediately, then it's possible to avoid the chaos altogether. If you understand where you have to go and what's important to you, and you understand at the end of the day what really is motivating you, very frequently you can skip the tears and the uncertainty and in our case in the law the expense of litigation, um, simply by really understanding what avoiding the chaos looks for everybody. And I always tell clients, listen, if you see me trying to find common ground with your spouse or with the opposing counsel, the reason is the key to a successful negotiation is understanding what matters to the other side. It's the easiest skill in the world to understand what matters to your own client. But figuring out what the recovery looks like to the other side is often the key to understanding how you can structure a good settlement.
Hmm. Tell me about any setbacks that you had to overcome, and what have you learned from those?
Thank God, I think my setbacks have been nothing out of the ordinary. I think I've been lucky enough to be associated with great people in my career, and I think that changing my environment and becoming comfortable with those changes. We talked before about how uh, chaos and I don't get along very well, and that means that change and I don't always get along very well. And I think the two times in my career where I've changed professional scenery, most recently launching my own firm about a year ago, I think those were the biggest setbacks for me because I think, like most people, I saw my life, I saw my career going in a particular trajectory. I saw the firm that I was going to be with at both of those stages being a firm where I'd stay, for the balance of my career. And when you realize that you have to make changes, and you realize that your needs and your family and your career are taking you in a different direction. I think sometimes we fight that a little bit because I think all of us naturally seek comfort. But at the same token, I think when you push yourself out of your comfort zone, that's the only time you realize how effective you can be and what you're actually made of. And thankfully, in my career, those have been the two large hurdles for me.
It's like we're fearing the change, but we feel it in our bones that that it would be a good thing. So that's a gutsy move. Especially someone who really doesn't like chaos. I can see how you really had to grow through that. So let's switch gears a little bit. I know you took a great trip to Alaska. It was probably last year. My gosh, the time just flies. And I saw pics that you posted of some pretty gnarly looking fish. They're huge, big eyes, but it looked like you guys had so much fun. And your friend Chris on the podcast. Actually, he mentioned that that trip was almost like therapeutic. It helped him reset in a major way. What was that like for you? And is are these trips a tradition that you started or you've been doing for a while?
Yeah, it started in about 2018. My dad, who is my best friend, even to this day, we got traveling on these sort of adventure vacations, and in 2018, we went to Africa and we climbed Mount Kilimanjaro together. And then obviously 2020, we said we'd do it every other year, and 2020 changed those plans. So in 2021 we found this beautiful Alaskan fishing lodge where you fish for halibut and salmon and rockfish, and it's all the way up in the Alaskan wilderness, 180 degrees from normal. And I wrote Chris Chameri and another friend of ours, Brian Johnson, and some of their family to come with us. Um, and I think the lesson that I always learned from my dad that sticks with me the most is that you work to live, you don't live to work. And so those trips where you treat yourself to some time away, and you recognize that part of the purpose of working is so that you can enjoy the one chance on this planet you get. I think when you go to a place that's so out of the ordinary like Alaska and to be there with great friends, I think those types of things help balance you out and they help you become a better attorney and a better parent and a better spouse, because the reality is you're getting away from the things which you do every day and grabbing that reset so that you can hit the ground running when you come back.
That is a great point. Being out in a nature, it almost like your problems seem to be less significant because you look at the vastness and realize that you're this one particle in this entire universe. And sometimes we as human beings have a tendency to really, inflate things much more than we should. So I can see how that could be refreshing, resetting, for many reasons. Never been to Alaska, but I've heard just amazing things. And then climbing Mount Kilimanjaro with your dad, that is, I did not know that. How long did it take you? What was that like?
Oh, it's 6 days up, so it's about 19,000 feet and change, and you talked about the insignificance of each one of us, and life becomes a lot easier when you realize how insignificant each person is, and how unimportant in the scheme of things we really are. And it's great to just be a place where you can enjoy being present. And when you're outside and it's cold and every muscle in your body aches, muscles in your body you didn't even know you had ache. Um, there's something refreshing about it, and I think it's grounding, it's centering, and it helps round you out. And I do like the idea of doing things that are a little out of the ordinary every once in a while. My next big adventure is cage diving with great whites in off of San Diego. So I'll update you on that one next time we get around to talking.
I hope to get a live update on that one. And that's from a
Long as I'm
man
lying.
who doesn't like who doesn't like chaos. Wow, that's pretty spectacular. Listen, I know you're a family guy. You have, 2 girls, right? You're married, and tell me, what do weekends look like in your house?
I think weekends in our house are pretty normal. I try to reserve as much of them as I can for my kids, although they're both in competitive dance. They love dance, and I love watching them dance. And it teaches them all of these great things about commitment and hard work and adversity and all of these great skills I think that kids need to learn these days. And admittedly, our weekends have become a lot about that. So my wife and I will spend a little time together. Or my second love, other than my family, is golf. So I'll play a lot of that. And when it's not golf season, I think it's catch up on work season. And so we're coming into that time of year where it's easier to be indoors than out. And so we do a little work on the weekends when we're not hanging out with the family.
You got a great sense of humor, but I'm curious, what if you can think of something recently, what would make you laugh, like really laugh out loud?
um,
Probably the
I
conversation we had before we started.
yeah, I had you have a lot of experiences where in your mind, I think particularly those of us who are a little bit control oriented, where you already sort of plan out how things are going to go in a particular situation in your head, and then uh, you you play them out, and they actually happen, and they go absolutely nothing like you had originally planned. I mean, they could not be more different than you had seen it going in your head. And I had a situation on a case like that recently, and at the end of the day, you're exhausted, and nothing went the way you thought it went. It ended up going just fine, even though it went totally sideways. And it's those days that make you sit back in your desk chair in a dark office with a scotch, and you just sort of laugh at how ridiculous life could be sometimes. You know?
You're right, you gotta laugh at yourself. You really do. I know what seems to be significant in a moment, it's so insignificant, like, 2 days later, it's like, "What was that about?" It's like, "What
Oh
the
yeah.
heck?" Yeah, no, that's so true. So finally, what advice would you give to young attorneys, now that you're not young, but, those that are entering the field?
I spent my whole young attorney career trying to shed the name young attorney, and now that people are referring to me as experienced, I wish I could be young again. But I think that I think that the main advice that I would give is to have a healthy expectation of what you as an attorney can accomplish for people. I think some of the big stumbling blocks that I had early in my career is I wanted to solve everybody's problems, and I wanted them to listen to me, because if they just listened to me, I'd solve all their problems. And sometimes that's not exactly what being a great attorney, I think, means. I think we provide advice and we provide counsel to people, and then if they don't take our advice, which they're free not to, have a plan on how you're going to limit the damage, and how you're going to help them out, and how you'll be their crisis manager as they're going through it. And you know don't have an ego about it. Have a
Mm.
healthy sense of collaboration with your client, and really make it a team effort. Make it appear that both of you have your hands on the wheel to a certain extent. And I think clients respond very well to that. I think the one thing that's lacking, particularly in the family law business, in a lot of clients' minds, are the skills of compassion and empathy. And I think that the lawyers that provide empathy and provide compassion, along with providing good quality, competent legal work, are the lawyers that clients tend to come back to over and over again.
That's actually really wise because I see it in even a written form because when we're in the middle sort of dealing with two sides and I see some attorneys how to communicate with each other. It's some have a tendency to bring the personal ego, like
Yeah.
you said, the personal sense of self. It's like it's really not about you. Right, and we forget sometimes. So that's really important to remember, not just compassion toward your client, but also, your I don't like the word adversary, or maybe opposing counsel, colleague, right? At the end of the day, we're all human
Yeah.
beings. Yeah.
Yeah, I rarely use the word adversary. I almost always use the word colleague, or
Yeah.
counterpart, or some variety of it, because I think it sets the right tone in a conversation. Because in reality, we work in one of the rare areas of law where generally both people want the same end result. It's just a version of that result where people are different. And I think it's kind of our job to meet each other at a reasonable distance apart and get that going.
Yeah, and you're almost like mirroring it, right? You're mirroring it for your children. If there's a conflict between you and your spouse, there's a healthy way of resolving it. The same really for the clients, the way you deal with your colleagues. You essentially are setting a tone. And yeah, I mean, look, there are some people who like to stay in perpetual war, and they attract those kinds of clients. And okay, that's fine. But that's actually great advice, John. Thank you to remember. Listen, it's been an absolute pleasure. We'll have to do part two after you come back live, or perhaps you will give us a live feed from the cage as you're. um, and so it's been an absolute pleasure having you here today and really just getting to know. the man behind the legal title. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. It's been great chatting with you.
And to our viewers and listeners, to find out more about John Fellin, click on his bio link below and also how to get a hold of him. And remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Beyond the Bar Podcast, and follow us on all social media channels. The links are posted below. And until next time, stay curious and inspired.